Welcome to the Off the Charts Football Podcast. I'm Matt Manocherian, former NFL scout and now director of football and research at Sports Info Solutions, joined by Aaron Schatz, the godfather of football analytics and the founder of Football Outsiders. As always, we're joined by our versatile producer, Justin Stein. And Aaron, we got to start off with the boring news of the day. Lamar Jackson has moved to number one in the total points rankings. No controversy anymore.
I'm shocked and outraged. I think he's pretty much going to win the MVP by accolation this year.
Yeah, it's near unanimous as far as I'm concerned. At least it should be, I think.
I don't think accolation is a word. I don't remember the word I'm looking for, but, everybody's going to vote for it.
I followed based on context. I'm with you. So what's going on? How are you doing today?
I'm tired, man. I don't know.
Crazy Christmas for you?
No, it's not like I've been working this week, but I think my body has decided it's vacation. You're actually on vacation. My body has just decided that it's vacation.
Yeah, I'm on vacation working hard on a Corona. So I'm enjoying that.
But hopefully you'll still be able to sit down and watch the games on Sunday because even though most of the playoffs is pretty close to decided, there are going to be some games that matter this Sunday.
And that's a good segue into our most important games of the week. The first of two of which involved teams that played each other last week. Obviously, the Cowboys and the Eagles playing in a very important game that the Cowboys may or may not have showed up to. But let's start off this week, our most important games of the week. What do you got right off the top?
Right. I mean, the most important games of the week primarily are games where it's win and you're in or lose and you're out for the playoffs. And so that starts with Philadelphia at the New York Giants, where Philadelphia is in the playoffs with a win. Like every game in Week 17, this is a rematch. Of course, these teams played only 3 weeks ago. And need I remind everybody, only 3 weeks ago, the incentives were basically the same. The Giants were playing for nothing. The Eagles were playing to try to make the playoffs, and yet the Eagles only won in overtime in a really close game that they were losing for most of it. So there's a good possibility here that the Giants beat the Eagles and possibly kick them out of the playoff spot.
Right. It's a tough matchup in certain ways. So going back to that Week 14 game, the Eagles were down 17-3 at one point. That was still Eli Manning, or I guess that was Eli Manning again for the Giants. And eventually they come back, they win the game in overtime. But since then, the Giants have won their last two, albeit against the Dolphins and the Washington football team. And now this time, Daniel Jones will be playing his first game against Philadelphia. So I'm zeroing in on that matchup, just like Eli Manning could take advantage of certain things with that Eagles secondary. I think that Daniel Jones can do a lot of the same stuff with a lot of the same weapons out there.
Yeah, I mean, both of these secondaries are pretty weak. So I think, the biggest issue will be pressure. Philadelphia is sort of an average team bringing defensive pressure, but the Giants are very below average in offensive pressure rate, and Daniel Jones takes a lot of pressure. So I do think if they try to run a lot with Saquon Barkley, that's going to be a problem because the Eagles are number 4 against the run. So you really want to pass the ball a lot.
Yeah, you look at, I don't trust anything on the Giants defense. The Eagles, you at least trust their front line to the run there. Both of these quarterbacks are guys that are going to kind of create some pressure for themselves because they like to hold on to the ball a little bit. Both guys with fumbling issues at times this year. But I think when you look at the trajectory of where these guys are career-wise, I'm all in on Wentz at this point. I think he's absolutely a win-with quarterback. And Daniel Jones, I think at this point, there's not enough of the good to overcome a lot of the bad. At least in a consistent framework.
He strikes me as a rookie. I'm not ready to.
That's fair.
Pass any judgment on Daniel Jones. He's having a pretty rookie-ish season for a rookie. But yeah, I think the Eagles are the better team here. And even though the game is in New Jersey, I do think that the Eagles are favored. Clearly, the Giants are the worst team in the league against number 1 receivers and other receivers. And I don't know who counts as that at this point for the Eagles, but they should be able to pass even though they have, poor receivers at this point. It'll be interesting to see what happens at tight end because Zach Ertz is injured and is apparently a true game time decision here. You might see a lot, with the wide receivers situation that they have right now, the Eagles have gone really to 12 personnel constantly, which means if Ertz can't play, then you'll see a lot of Josh Perkins. Sneaky DFS pick for Week 17, Josh Perkins.
I like it. I like the sneaky DFS pick. So the Eagles are a shell of themselves, but somehow they can find their way to win the division if they win this game. On the other side of the thing, the Giants, you mentioned this game is happening in the Meadowlands in New Jersey. And I'm curious with the potential of the Giants winning to sort of help the Cowboys potentially, along with a Giants fan base that I think would love to see the GM and head coach out of town. Is there any chance that sort of the Giants fans are kind of rooting for the Eagles here?
It's really hard to flip that switch on yourself. But I'm sure I think you'll get a normal home field advantage. I'm sure there'll be enough Giants fans who are rooting for the Giants that there won't be any kind of a switch of the home field advantage.
Curious stuff. So at the end of the day, I kind of think with this one that just the Eagles need this game too badly. And even with all of their holes in their team and their injuries this year, I think they've got to do this one against an inferior Giants team.
I favor the Eagles, but I think the Giants have a better chance to win than most people are probably giving them credit for. I mean, they kept that game close in Philadelphia. That was only 3 weeks ago. And I bring this up always, but I mean, which team needs it more in Week 17 doesn't always work out. And the example that I always bring up is 2004, when Buffalo was super red hot and needed a win to make the playoffs, played a Pittsburgh team that was resting starters and still lost.
All right, so on that note, if the Giants can beat the Eagles, that will bring us to our second most important game of the week.
And that is Washington at Dallas, where, of course, Dallas is out with a loss. And with a win, they have to wait and see if the Eagles lose to see if they're in. And, of course, the Cowboys have been the team that have confused advanced metrics. Every advanced metric out there has the Cowboys as a top 10 team, as far as I know. Despite the fact that they're 7-8. Right now, if the season ended, they would end the season as the best losing team in DVOA history. Now, they won't, because either they're going to lose this game and their rating will probably go down, in which case they won't be the best losing team in DVOA history, or they'll win this game, in which case they won't be a losing team. They'll be an 8-8 team. But right now, they would if they tied this game and had the same rating that they have for the whole year, they would end up as the best losing team in 35 years by our numbers.
Yeah, it's really remarkable. And I saw you kind of post about this in the DVOA column this week, which I'd highly recommend to all of our listeners on footballoutsiders.com. But then I also saw you kind of going back and forth about this a little bit. And it's kind of a perplexing team that the Cowboys are. They, like you said, they're top 10 in every sort of statistical rating you look at, especially offensively. They're a really good team. But at the end of the day, they have a losing record right now, and they're probably not going to make the playoffs. It strikes me as a situation where we'll be looking at next year, and you kind of alluded to this, we'll be looking at this next year and we'll be saying the Cowboys project to win more games than they won this past year, just based on the season ending and next season beginning and all the randomness being reset for next year that it was. And then on top of that, if they do make a coaching change, I think there's real reason to believe that they could even outperform that number in terms of being able to convert wins into victories.
Yeah, I think everything sets up for Dallas to be really good next year, because the thing that they've been really good at this year is the thing that's most consistent from year to year, and that's offense. If their defense gets better, their special teams probably get better, the coaching decisions get better, everything points at Dallas. But that's not going to really salve any of the wounds from 2019 that the Dallas fans have, seeing their team, kick ass over the Rams and the Dolphins and then lose all these close games. The Cowboys are 0-5 in games decided by 7 points or less. And they can win this game over Washington and still miss the playoffs if Philadelphia wins their game.
Yeah, so and then in that situation, all of a sudden they're kind of a dangerous playoff team in a weird way.
Yeah, if they, it's really funny because if you go back, a lot of these 8-8 and 7-9 type teams that have made the playoffs as the fourth seed have ended up winning their first playoff game, right? The Beastquake Seahawks won, and the 7-8-1 Panthers won. And St. Louis made the playoffs as an 8-8 wild card one year and then went into Seattle and won. So Dallas, if Dallas actually makes it, I think Dallas is a little dangerous. It's weird to say, but they are.
I was fascinated to read about that all week. And then I kind of wanted to turn back and look back at last game too. I don't understand Amari Cooper not being on the field on the most important play.
Neither do I.
This is one of those things where, you always say they call it football outsiders for a reason. But I've been behind the curtain with some teams, and I've seen receivers ask out, and I'm always trying to figure out things based on, okay, if I saw Robert Meacham do this, if I saw Marcus Colston do this, what would this have been like? What was probably going on there? There are times when people are winded and you have rotations, which was their excuse, but that's not a legitimate explanation for this situation. There's something going on here because Amari Cooper's not an interchangeable part that's going to come off the field in this sort of a must-have situation. He's probably going to be the targeted receiver based on the play call in this situation. So there's something going on either personally with somebody somewhere or something really silly. And I use that word kind of nicely. There was a really silly mistake that happened here on the Cowboys' part. And that's kind of best case scenario because my best guess is that this is something worse than that.
I believe they had a timeout. It's a do or die play. You call a timeout to get your best player on the field for the do or die play.
It makes no sense, and it makes no sense that he wouldn't be out there, that he wouldn't be clamoring to be out there, that he wouldn't be upset about it after the fact. I think he's ready for a new head coach as well.
If he's with Dallas next year, right? I mean, that's the problem with the Cowboys, and this is the negative part of looking at the Cowboys' future, is that they need to pay a lot of players, and they don't necessarily have the money to pay them all because they gave the money to Ezekiel Elliott. Now they have to figure out about Dak and about Amari Cooper and about Byron Jones, and they've already paid the offensive line, and they've already paid Ezekiel Elliott.
And they paid DeMarcus Lawrence as well, right?
Yep, and they paid DeMarcus
the linebackers. Lawrence. I think they paid the linebackers too.
So I'm not going to argue with the DeMarcus Lawrence one, certainly, but we said Byron Jones and Amari Cooper and Dak are coming up, and are you going to have money for everybody? And this offseason, they're going to face that.
I don't have the advanced stats in front of me, but I don't think it was a great season for Byron Jones. Just if my memory serves correctly.
Yeah, I still, given the inconsistency of secondary play and cornerback, I still think he'd be considered their best cornerback and somebody that you want to bring back. Looking here for the stats, he ended up being 13th in yards allowed per pass among qualifying corners, but 36th in success rate.
Okay, no, that's not
still an above average season.
Yep, very good year for Byron Jones. I take it back, and he's a great fit for their scheme, obviously. So they'll have to figure out a way there. Good news is I think the salary cap's gone up by at least $10 million for 6 straight years now, so that helps.
As far as this game, I will say Washington is strong against the other team's top receivers, so this may not be a big game for Amari Cooper. He did have a touchdown in the first game between these teams, but he only had 44 yards. That was way back in week 2 when the Cowboys won 31-21. And here's a really strange split. The Washington offense by down is dead last on first down, 9th on second down, and then dead last on third down.
That's bizarre. It sounds like
I love bizarre splits like that. I always scratch my head and I'm like, is there a reason for that? And
when you get, is that like
what the reason would be? But we don't think a lot about second down, but second down does have some specific strengths and weaknesses to it because, you could be a team that runs a lot on second down and therefore you'd have a lot of failure because you'd probably only get 3 or 4 yards when you need to be getting 7 on 2nd and 10. Or you could be a team that likes to go to the air on 2nd and down and use play action on 2nd and down. So maybe you have a lot of success on second down. I don't know. Splits like that are always interesting.
Right. I'm wondering if you're more likely to be a run team on first down, you could be kind of like artificially pushing down your run success rate and then maybe setting yourself up to need to pass on second down and actually not being all that bad at it, which kind of ties in. Dwayne Haskins out for this game, but Case Keenum back in.
Haskins was really bad in his first couple games. He's come back and been better in his last couple games, so that for the season, Keenum and Haskins have been roughly equal by our numbers.
Interesting to see how the Cowboys come to play in this one for my best guess is their last game under Jason Garrett.
Yep, we'll see what happens with Philadelphia. But, the same thing I think with the Giants, which is I think that Washington has a better chance to win this game than people probably give them credit for, although Washington is on the road, whereas the Giants are at home.
Right, and I think that it basically explains the difference because I think Washington's something like a 10-point dog and the Giants are something like a 4-point dog. But if you consider home field, those would both be 7-point spreads kind of on a neutral field. So it makes sense there when you look at it that way.
Either way, I think whoever wins the NFC East, as strange as it sounds, they're not necessarily going to go quietly in the first round of the playoff because both of these teams are better than their record, according to advanced stats.
All right, let's switch over to the other conference and talk about our next most important game of the week.
And here's another one that we just did a couple of weeks ago. Now, it's Tennessee at Houston, right? The Texans won 24-21 2 weeks ago. Now, here's the problem. This game is meaningless if Kansas City beats the Chargers at 1 o'clock. And I think that that's pretty likely. So we don't have to spend too much time talking about what may end up being a meaningless game. Certainly, if Houston sits starters, Tennessee has a distinct advantage in this game, and Tennessee needs to win this. If Tennessee wins this game, Tennessee gets the number 6 spot in the AFC. If they lose this game, then Pittsburgh has to win. If Pittsburgh loses, then you get into this whole complicated thing that possibly involves the Raiders. So let's just say Tennessee needs to win.
Yeah, for the Texans, I'm with you. Even if Kansas City lose, there's almost no difference between the number 3 and the number 4 seed for the Texans. So I'd be surprised if they don't rest their really important players like Watson and Fuller. Theoretically, there's some argument for wanting to face the like you said, the Oakland or the Pittsburghs of the world as opposed to the Bills.
Also, I think, and it's strange to say this, but given the way teams have been this year, you would rather go to Foxborough in the divisional round and have Baltimore be forced to face Kansas City than have to go to Baltimore in the divisional round.
I think the key thing that makes this really not that much of a conversation is another thing, in addition to if the Chiefs win, but you got to rest Watson and Fuller in this one. Kevin Cole put out.
Fuller's not going to play. They've already said Fuller can't play.
But looking at the research there that Kevin Cole pulled out, but also Keegan Abdu had pointed out long before this through statistics, and my old boss Michael Lombardi has been howling about for weeks, this offense is much better with Fuller in the game. And resting him enables you to do so much more in the playoffs than any sort of a strategy that you would want to squeeze him out of this game. So I think that's just such a key aspect to their offense. The EPA differential is just stark. I think it's hard to imagine that. So
it's also a reason to believe that Tennessee should be really favored in this game, even though it's in Houston. Even if Houston has to try in this game, the fact that Will Fuller is not going to play this week makes things better for Tennessee.
And then literally just 2 weeks ago, it was 14-0 Texans, then it was 14-14, then it was 24-14 Texans. Pretty evenly matched game statistically, some red zone turnovers for both teams. But we're both saying the same thing here. We're doubting the Texans come in full force, so it looks like a good game for the Titans to win.
I mean, it's not like Houston should be rooting for Kansas City to win so that they can sit Watson. But I think if Kansas City does win, they should sit Watson.
What if Kansas City loses? Do you still sit Watson?
No, I think it's better to be the 3 than the 4, and I would play.
It's enough of a difference there?
I think there's enough of a difference there, given the difference in quality this year between the Patriots and the Ravens. And the hope that because Kansas City is one of the teams that actually beat the Ravens this year, the hope that maybe Kansas City could go to Baltimore and beat them. I think it's worth playing to be the 3.
Interesting stuff. All right, let's keep it moving forward and talk about our last game of the week, the most important game for Super Bowl odds. What do you got there?
Well, the most important game for Super Bowl odds by far. It's the only game this week that really matters heavily for both teams, and that's Sunday night's flex game, San Francisco at Seattle. Now, the odds here are really stark for San Francisco because, of course, if they lose this, I believe they become the 6, and if they win, they're the 1. So San Francisco is in the Super Bowl 38.5% of the time if they win, and only 9.3% of simulations when they lose. For Seattle, the difference is much smaller because with a win, they probably are the 3, so they don't get the bye. So Seattle is 11.4% with a win, 6.1% with a loss. Rematch, like all Week 17 games, Seattle won 27-24 in San Francisco in overtime back in Week 10.
Yeah, interesting game here. In one sense, you look at the Seahawks at home, and they've won 4 of their last 5 games as home dogs with Russell Wilson, which adds up and makes sense. You wouldn't want to kind of bet on that guy as an underdog at home. But on the contrary, the Seahawks have not been that good at home this year. And this, I think, goes back to something that you've been talking about for years, and that's that home field advantage is not better at one place or another over time.
And what's crazy is the one place that it does look like it's been better over time is Seattle, but maybe we just weren't looking at a long enough period of time.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. The struggles at home, the better road record than home record this year. And then here they come into this game, the big story, Marshawn Lynch. What do you think of that one?
Well, I think it's kind of cool that Marshawn is back, but I was kind of hoping that the injuries at running back would force Seattle to put the ball more in Russell Wilson's hands and depend on him more to win the game, because they are a much more efficient team when they depend on Russell Wilson. And to me, the story is the loss of Dwayne Brown from an offensive line that already had a lot of problems this year. To lose your left tackle, who was clearly the best player on that offensive line, that's a big loss. Now, San Francisco, here's what's interesting. San Francisco does not bring as much defensive pressure as people think they do, at least based on the SIS charting. They're only 20th in defensive pressure. But Seattle is 30th in offensive pressure allowed. It's a combination of how Wilson plays and how the offensive line plays. You don't have to argue about whether pressure allowed is a quarterback stat or an offensive line stat with this offensive line. It's definitely both.
Yep, there's no doubt about it, and it only gets worse when you're missing Dwayne Brown going against the leader in points saved defensively for edge players, Nick Bosa, this year, who's been just outrageous on that defensive line, along with lots of players on the San Francisco defense that have been really remarkable. It's funny to me, this is one of those matchups that feels like the best team versus the best quarterback sort of matchup, with the Niners just really being stacked at a lot of places, from Kittle and the offense to what they do defensively with Sherman and Warner at linebacker, and they're obviously.
And they've had some injuries at cornerback, and I think most of those guys are back at this point. Sherman is back at this point. So, San Francisco's dropped to 10th against the pass by DVOA since week 10. But some of the injured players are back at this point.
And I think the kind of Super Bowl odds numbers are really enlightening in terms of matching the eye test, because San Francisco, if they get that first round bye, yeah, this is a really likely team to make the Super Bowl. It makes a lot of sense. Whereas I think Seattle, I think there are lots of reasons. You mentioned the offensive line. I think that's a great place to start, but I think there are a lot of holes on this team that are not Russell Wilson that I think show up. So at the end of this one, Seattle playing at home, that's been a big thing in the past. Hate to bet against Russell Wilson, but San Francisco really needs this game. I know we said that the team that needs it doesn't always win in Week 17, but I think enough of their talent will show through in this one, and I think they'll overwhelm the Seahawks with what they have.
The other thing about the Seahawks versus the 49ers is the Seahawks have had no defensive pressure this year. Despite the presence of Jadeveon Clowney, they're dead last in defensive pressure rate. San Francisco is 4th in preventing pressure on offense, so Jimmy Garoppolo should have time to throw back there.
Sports Info Solutions is excited to announce the launch of its public-facing site, SISDataHub.com. The new SIS Data Hub is free for all to use and features detailed player pages and leaderboards that provide some of the best information available. In addition to all of the standard statistics, here you'll find proprietary data collected by SIS Video Scouts, like on-target percentage for quarterback, pressure rates for edge rushers, blown blocks for offensive linemen, and more. You'll also find advanced metrics calculated from all of that data, like independent quarterback rating, total points earned, total points saved, and many, many more statistics, from adjusted blown block percent to positive percentage for receivers, quarterbacks, running backs, broken tackles, air yards, and more. For the most avid football fanatics, a pro version of the Data Hub is also available, which contains everything from the free version as well as filters to split by situation, personnel, and almost anything else imaginable, coverage scheme, run direction, and more. The Data Hub Pro also includes team leaderboards, NCAA data, and the ability to download all data as CSV files. You can register for a free 7-day trial by going to pro.sisdatahub.com.
And on that note, we will get out of here. Thank you all for listening. For more from Football Outsiders, go to footballoutsiders.com for content and statistics, including DVOA and more. And then for more from SIS, you can check out 2 free sites of ours, sportsinfosolutionsblog.com for all our content, and SISdatahub.com for free advanced statistics, including total points. For my co-host Aaron Schatz and our producer Justin Stein, I'm Matt Manocherian, and thank you for joining us for the latest episode of the Off the Charts Football Podcast.